All right, hey, Honor Community Jeff here again. So this is part 2 of my Antique Mall find, where I found all the albums. You've seen part 1. Part 1, I broke in and showed half of what I found, and this is part 2, the other half of the cool items, at least to me, the hole fillers and cool collectibles that I was looking, that I was excited to find at the Antique Mall. So here is part 2. All right, then I just, like I said, then I kept flipping. Have you ever been, I'm sure you have, because I think we all go through this. You're just flipping through albums and you run across somebody that, you don't have a clue who they are from Adam. It's just like, who are they? But the cover catches your eye. Something about their look catches your eye. Now, you got to be careful with that, because sometimes looks can be deceiving. But occasionally, I mean, it at least makes you stop and look. And that's what I do. I stop and look. And then I'm like, oh, never mind. I see some albums where the guys look killer. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute. This is not even the music that it looks like it would match up with. There's something about it that gives it away. Well, I ran across this and it just caught my eye. It was the colors. It was the guitar. It was the way the guy looked. Vic Vergot. I don't know. It looked like an 80s rocker. I have no idea who this was. Got a big, flying V looking guitar on there. So it just caused me to pause and look at it. And I thought, okay, it's on Capitol Records. It looks heavy. It's got, the color scheme, the lighting. I had no clue who this was. Still don't have any clue. But what I always do is I always go right to who's on the album, because I have found so many albums with so-and-so playing on an album that you didn't know about, that's when I'm like, oh, that's cool. So I check it out. And that's exactly what this is. The drummer is Bobby the Blotzer. This is a 1981 album with Bobby Blotzer on drums. Who's Bobby Blotzer? You don't know who Bobby... You in the corner? You know who Bobby Blotzer... Yeah, you're right. See, Bobby was the drummer for Rat, right? So after this, Rat. This would have been pre-Rat. And now... I did pull it up. I did sample some songs. Now, that's cool. It's kind of... it's not heavy. The guy, it's an Italian guitar player. I did find out that when I looked it up that he just passed away like in December, like 6 months ago. But this was really, he only had on Discogs, there's only like 3 or 4 recordings by him. And this is really the only main album. And then he does have an album with Mark Storace. It's him and Mark Storace. In some ways it was labeled Blue. In other words, it was called Vergot and Mark Storace, or Storace. Mark being Storace from, Crocus. So there is an album out there that's very AOR-ish, that's got Mark Storace singing on it. So that would be a cool find. But this looks like the only one that really looked like it was meant to be somewhat of a rocker. And a lot of the songs have a boogie to them, kind of a little bluesy, a little boogie-ish, a little rockabilly. Not really rockabilly. They got a really cool groove to them. They're really upbeat and fun. Now, I did notice it's got Bobby Blotzer is the drummer, but then in small print it says so-and-so played drums on the Stars with the asterisks. And I'm looking and I'm like, okay, about half the songs have asterisks. So what I'm assuming is Bobby's in the band. He's the drummer for the band. But when the album was recorded, maybe he came in late. There was already half the album was recorded with the other drummer. Maybe that drummer left. He joined the band. By the time the album was released, Bobby was the drummer, but he didn't play on all the songs. And so I'm listening to the album, and it starts off with the other drummer. All the songs except for the last song. But I didn't know where I was in the record. I'm just listening in the background. I'm enjoying it. I'm like, this is some cool stuff. And then all of a sudden it got to that last song. And it, to me at least, as a drummer, I'm like, that's a different drummer. It changed the flair of it altogether. So yeah, it's noticeable between the other drummer and Bobby. At least in my opinion, it just was a different feel. But yeah, the album ended up being quite enjoyable. I did not know what Bobby had done before Rat. And so, fun stuff. And again, I bought it because of Bobby's influence there, and it turned out to be pretty cool to have that. So again, that's just a buy based on the catching of the eye and then looking details at who played on it. Had no clue what the album was going to be. Okay, and then I'm going, this is just random UFO Mechanics. I almost put this back, because this is the non-Michael Schenker era. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just was like, I don't really need it considering what I bought. But then I thought, well, I'm going to get it because it's you don't always find. I've seen Mechanics in the wall before, but you don't always find them. And it was really, inexpensive, and it was in decent condition. It was in great condition, the vinyl. It's just a little beat up. I thought that'd be cool, so I went ahead and kept that. Now, My wife was in the other section looking, and you know, I see these albums quite often, but she picked it up, and I thought, okay, you know, again, they were fairly cheap. Eddie Money, I picked up the first Eddie Money. I didn't realize this was the first Eddie Money. I see these albums all the time. They all look to me a lot, they look similar because they all have him on the cover. So I'm not always sure. I just kind of flip by. Usually the other one is the second album, where Life for the Taking, where he's like, it's color. You know, this is black and white, and then it's a color picture of him in there. So I know the hits by Eddie Money. I think you look back, and I think he's got like 5 main hits. And my band plays Two Tickets to Paradise, which is from this album, which I didn't realize that A, it was from his first album, and that B, his first album was in 1977. So I always associated him with early 80s stuff because he was all over the radio and all over MTV in the 80s. But Two Tickets to Paradise and Baby Hold On are on this album from 1977. Again, great condition. Again, like $5, $6, I think. My wife picked it up and she said, "You want that?" And I'm like, you know, I don't own any Eddie Money in my vinyl collection, so yeah, let's go ahead and get that. So we picked up Eddie Money. Now, I did, again, I don't know a whole lot about Eddie Money. I know the hits. I know the album covers that I see in the wild, but I don't know the chronology of the albums, when the albums were, what albums had hits. Things like that. So I did just a brief research, and if I'm wrong here, ignore me or you know, yell at me or whatever. So I had that album with the 2 hits, and then like the next 2 albums, Life for the Taking of '78 and Playing for Keeps was 1980. I don't think those albums had really any notable hits from them. And then in '82 you have No Control, and that's where we had a couple bigger hits from there. So there were a couple albums there, which are, now I've never seen Playing for Keeps. I saw that album cover online. I'm like, I've never seen that album before. I've never seen it on vinyl in the wild. It's out there, but that is not one. I always see Life for the Taking. I always see the first album. I always see like Where's the Party, things like that. But I've never seen that third album. I've never seen it, period. I think I've ever heard it. But anyway, there were no big hits from those 2 albums. And then No Control had a couple hits. And then he had Where's the Party, which is one of the ones you see out in the wild all the time, him at the phone booth. I don't think there were any hits on that album. There were nothing major at that point. In 1986, Can't Hold Back, you know, Take Me Home Tonight was on that album. And that's an album I don't think I've ever seen out in the wild on vinyl, per se. I didn't even realize he had to hit that late. I thought all those songs would have been prior to that. And Nothing to Lose, 1988, you know, had Walk on Water, which was a sort of a hit, minor hit, I think. And then he had quite a few albums in the 90s. I don't know anything about that. Never heard a song, never heard song 1, never seen pictures. I don't think I knew anything about his existence in the 90s. So he's got a pretty extensive catalog. But there are just a few pivotal albums, you know, that he's had like 5 major hits, and they were all scattered across like 3 albums. And I didn't realize all those other albums that I do see in the wild often. I'm like, none of them really had, I mean, a couple of them, you see them all the time, and maybe that's why they're out there, because they didn't seem to have any of the hits on some of those. So anyway, now I know a little more about Eddie Money, or Eddie Mahoney, as his real name is. And then Greg Kihn Band. I have quite a few Greg Kihn bands. I've picked them up over the years, but I don't have the one with Jeopardy, but now I do. So I picked this up again for just a few dollars, and one step closer to having the majority of the Greg Kihn stuff back in the day from that time period. And of course, this is the one that has Jeopardy and was one of the bigger hits back in the day. Grabbed that, and then my wife found this, and again, I don't know why it was over there in that section, but A Day at the Races. I have a night at the opera, and so I thought, well, we might as well have A Day at the Races, and you know, we picked it up, and it was in excellent condition. This one was over $10, 15 or so, but it was, you know, and it was in superb condition. So, and I said, yeah, okay, let's. I don't want to pass on that. It's rare to find Queen in the wild, and it's rare to find Queen in the wild for really this price. They always tend to be a little pricier because they're a big band. So we grabbed that. So yeah, it was kind of a fun day, kind of a great time. And then I thought, when I walked out of that store with the stack, I think it was like 8 albums there. I'm like, yeah, we can go. We had some stuff we had to run errands with, and we just happened to be passing by. And she said, yeah, stop it. And I thought, man, there's a couple other 1 or 2 spots in this place I'd like to hit, but I'm like, I'm done. I've got enough here. So grabbed these and went out. And you know, some great stuff there, some fun stuff. So yeah, we had a great day out shopping and looking about, and we did hit another record store later. Well, actually, a day later in a different part of town, but I'll save that for another day. That's it for this one, though. Thanks a lot for watching. Rock on, rock hard.